A night of secrets, when two young men kept me awake. Have you ever experienced a night where peace suddenly turned into an unstoppable storm of emotions? That's exactly what happened when Logan, my carefree stepson, and Gabriel, his mysterious and captivating friend, appeared at my door in the dead of night. From their intense gazes to their unexpected actions, they made my heart race and left questions that lingered long after. What truly unfolded in that room? The answer will leave you speechless. I never knew something like this could truly happen. That night began just like any other, calm, uneventful, and utterly ordinary. I had no way of knowing that everything was about to change. That my life was about to take a turn so unexpected it would leave me questioning everything. Logan, my stepson, had always been somewhat distant, polite but reserved. He didn't go out of his way to connect with me, and I had learned to accept it as part of our relationship. So when he came home that evening with one of his close friends, Gabriel, I didn't think much of it. Logan often brought friends over, and they usually filled the house with noise and laughter, their youthful energy buzzing like electricity. But Gabriel was different. I had seen him before, maybe 2 or 3 times at most. We'd exchanged a polite nod or two, but our interactions never went beyond that. Gabriel was striking, not in the loud, attention-grabbing way of someone trying to stand out, but in a quieter, more magnetic sense. He was tall, with long, lean legs that seemed to stretch endlessly, and his movements were deliberate, almost calculated, as though he was always deep in thought. He didn't laugh loudly or dominate conversations like Logan and his other friends. Instead, he carried himself with a calm reserve that made him seem older than his years. Even though he rarely spoke, Gabriel had a presence that was impossible to ignore. It wasn't just his height or his neat, understated style of dress. There was something in his eyes, an intensity, a quiet focus that made you feel as though he saw the world differently. He didn't just glance at things, he studied them, as if peeling back layers to uncover hidden truths. There was a gravity about him, a sense of depth that was almost unnerving. When he entered the house that evening, he acknowledged me with a slight nod. Not overly friendly, but respectful. It was the kind of gesture that made you feel seen in a way that was both unsettling and intriguing. I found myself wondering what Logan saw in him. What had drawn them together as friends? Gabriel was unlike any of Logan's other companions, who were loud, boisterous, and full of chaotic energy. By contrast, Gabriel was calm, composed, and enigmatic, as though he carried secrets he had no intention of sharing. The night unfolded uneventfully, or so I thought. Logan and Gabriel hung out in the living room, their voices a quiet hum in the background as I went about my evening routine. By the time I went to bed, the house was peaceful. I slipped under the covers, certain that the rest of the night would pass without incident. But just as my eyes grew heavy and I began to drift off, a sound pulled me back to full awareness. A knock. It was soft, almost hesitant, like the faint tapping of a branch against the window. For a moment, I thought I'd imagined it, dismissed it as the creak of the house settling or the whisper of the wind outside. But then I heard it again, followed by the slow, deliberate creak of my bedroom door opening. The sound sent a jolt through me, and I sat up slightly, my heart beginning to race. Standing in the doorway, framed by the dim light of the hallway, was Gabriel. His tall figure cast a long shadow across the floor, stretching toward me like something out of a dream or a nightmare. He stood there in silence. His face calm but unreadable. His eyes, steady and unblinking, seemed to pierce through the darkness, locking onto mine with an intensity that made the air in the room feel colder. I couldn't understand why he was there, standing at my door in the middle of the night. My mind raced with questions, none of which I could voice. "Is everything okay?" I finally managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. Gabriel didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stepped into the room, his movements slow and deliberate, as if he were testing the boundaries of the space. The silence between us was thick, almost suffocating, and I felt my pulse quicken as an uneasy tension filled the air. "I couldn't sleep," he said at last, his voice calm and measured, completely at odds with the charged atmosphere in the room. "I thought maybe you couldn't either." His words hung in the air, strange and out of place. I blinked, trying to make sense of them. Why would Gabriel think I couldn't sleep? And even if I couldn't, why would he come to me? Where was Logan? "You should go back to bed," I said, my voice firmer now, though I couldn't hide the slight tremor in it. But Gabriel didn't move. He stood his ground, his gaze unwavering. "I thought we could talk," he said, as though it were the most natural thing in the world. There was something unsettling in his calmness, in the way he looked at me as if he already knew how I would respond. I felt the weight of his presence pressing down on me, and for a moment, I couldn't think, couldn't breathe. I should have sent him away, told him firmly to leave. But I didn't. Instead, I sat there, frozen, caught in a strange, unspoken tension that I couldn't understand. The room felt smaller, the air heavier, and in that moment, I knew this night was not going to end the way it had begun. My chest tightened, the unease creeping into every corner of my being. Talk at this hour? I glanced at the clock. It was past midnight. The kind of time when silence feels alive and shadows stretch longer than they should. My mind raced, sifting through fragments of reason to explain why Gabriel was here. Logan was his friend, not me. Gabriel had no reason to seek me out, especially not like this. I tried to steady my breathing, but my instincts were sounding an alarm. Something was wrong. I couldn't place it, couldn't name it, but it hung in the air between us, a presence, a tension that didn't belong. "I think it's too late to talk," I managed, my voice steady but laced with a nervous edge I couldn't hide. "We can talk tomorrow. You really should go." But he didn't move. Gabriel stayed rooted to the spot, his posture stiff, his gaze sharp and unwavering. He seemed less like a man and more like a statue, carved out of some ancient material that didn't yield to time or reason. His eyes fixed on me, blinking so infrequently it was unnerving. It wasn't just the way he looked at me, it was the stillness of it all. The way he seemed to be waiting for something invisible to unfold. The silence between us swelled, becoming a living thing that pressed against my chest. It grew louder, more oppressive, until I felt like I could hear my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. The room, once familiar and comforting, began to feel alien. The walls seemed closer, the ceiling lower, as if the space itself were conspiring to trap me. I shifted in my bed, pulling the blanket closer to my body as if it could shield me from this suffocating tension. And then it hit me. The door. I hadn't locked it. My stomach dropped. cold realization flooding through me. Why hadn't I locked it? I always locked my door. Almost without thinking. But tonight, I hadn't. The thought of that unlocked door, of how easily Gabriel had walked in, sent a shiver racing up my spine. Something about his presence didn't feel right. It wasn't just the hour or the fact that he was here uninvited. It was deeper than that. An unspoken wrongness that I couldn't name. His presence carried an invisible weight. Like a shadow cast by something I couldn't see. His eyes bore into me. Searching for something I didn't know how to give. My heart pounded harder. Faster. This was not the Gabriel I knew. Not the casual acquaintance I had encountered through Logan. This was someone different. Something different. The air in the room grew heavier. Thick with unspoken words and unnameable tension. Gabriel. You should leave. I said again. More firmly this time. But the words felt hollow. Like they dissolved before reaching him. He didn't flinch. Instead, he took a step closer. Crossing a line that wasn't drawn on the floor but felt as real as a locked gate. My breath hitched. My mind raced with options. Each one more absurd than the last. Call for help. Run. Yell. But my body betrayed me. Stuck in that moment. Frozen in place as if the room itself were holding me captive. Gabriel moved again. And this time, he didn't stop until he was sitting on the edge of my bed. The mattress dipped slightly under his weight. The movement jarring against the suffocating stillness. A cold shiver ran down my spine. And I gripped the blanket tighter. My throat felt dry. My voice caught somewhere between fear and disbelief. Before I could react, Logan appeared in the doorway. Relief surged through me for a brief, fleeting moment, only to be replaced by confusion. Logan didn't seem surprised or concerned. He wasn't angry. In fact, he looked eerily calm. As if he had expected this. His expression was unreadable. A mask of quiet detachment. He stepped into the room casually. Almost leisurely. And sat down on the other side of my bed. Logan, I began. My voice barely audible. I expected him to say something. To demand an explanation from Gabriel or to acknowledge the strangeness of the situation. But he didn't. Instead, he exchanged a look with Gabriel, one so subtle. So loaded with meaning. That it left me breathless. The silence thickened. A suffocating fog that filled every inch of the room. My pulse roared in my ears as I watched them. Both of them sitting there. So close yet so far from understanding. The look they shared was unnerving. It wasn't one of confusion or surprise, it was understanding. A silent, shared knowledge that I wasn't a part of. What's going on? I whispered. My voice trembling. Breaking under the weight of my fear. Neither of them answered. They sat there as if time had stopped. As if the night had frozen us all in place. Their silence spoke volumes. But none of it made sense to me. The room felt impossibly small now. The air so dense it was hard to breathe. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. Every beat a desperate plea for clarity. But clarity never came. Gabriel and Logan remained silent. Their presence a heavy, unrelenting force that pressed down on me. They knew something I didn't. They were waiting for something. And I was caught in the middle. Drowning in the thick, oppressive quiet. Terrified of what would come next. My mind began to spiral. An uncontrollable whirlwind of thoughts and emotions surging through me. It felt as though I was being swept into a vortex of uncertainty. unable to grasp anything tangible. I think we all know, Logan said quietly. His voice measured and unervingly calm. It was so unlike him, the Logan I had always known. The one whose carefree laughter could brighten the dullest of days. Now, his tone was serious, deliberate, and his words carried a weight I wasn't prepared for. I looked at him, my heart hammering in my chest. This wasn't the playful, light-hearted Logan who was always quick with a joke or a teasing remark. His demeanor had shifted so dramatically that it was almost as if I were staring at a stranger. The confusion in my mind deepened. What could have caused such a transformation? What was Gabriel doing in my room at this hour? Why did the air feel so charged? Thick with an unspoken tension I couldn't decipher. The knot in my stomach tightened. And all I wanted was to escape. To flee this room and the unsettling emotions that filled it. Logan inhaled deeply, his chest rising and falling in a way that betrayed his own nervousness despite his composed exterior. You know, he began, his voice barely above a whisper. We've always kept this a secret. But the truth is, my friends and I really admire you. We've talked about it so many times. And tonight they gave me the courage to finally tell you how we feel. I blinked, unsure if I had heard him correctly. Admire me? His words hung in the air, their meaning elusive yet heavy. My heart raced as I tried to process what he was saying. Admired me in what way? My chest felt tight as a mixture of confusion, disbelief, and an odd flicker of excitement swirled within me. Logan's gaze held mine, unflinching and earnest. Whatever he was trying to express, he meant it. The silence stretched between us, heavy and electric. What do you mean? I finally managed to whisper, my voice quivering. My question seemed to hang in the space between us, unanswered. As Logan and Gabriel exchanged glances, there was an understanding in their eyes. A silent communication I wasn't a part of. Logan turned back to me, his expression solemn but sincere. We've always felt something different when we're around you, he said slowly, as if each word was carefully chosen. It's hard to explain, but it's like you have this presence that draws us in. It's not just admiration, it's something deeper. Gabriel nodded, stepping closer as he spoke. It's this warmth, he said softly, his voice carrying a hint of vulnerability. When you're around, it feels like everything is more alive, more vibrant. We've talked about it so many times, trying to make sense of it. And we thought it was time to tell you. My thoughts raced, and my breathing quickened. Was this really happening? Were they saying that they felt something for me, something more than friendship? It felt surreal, like I had stepped into a story that wasn't mine. I wanted to respond, to ask the dozens of questions swirling in my mind. But the words wouldn't come. My voice seemed trapped, lost somewhere between my shock and confusion. And then, without warning, Logan and Gabriel did something I never could have anticipated. They began to undress, their movements slow and deliberate. My breath caught in my throat as I watched in stunned disbelief. They removed their shirts first, then their pants, until they stood before me completely bare. My mind reeled as I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. My cheeks burned with heat, and I averted my gaze instinctively, though the image of them was seared into my mind. We have nothing to hide from you, Logan said, his voice steady but not without a hint of vulnerability. This is us, and we wanted to be honest with you. I stared at them, my thoughts a chaotic jumble. What was happening? Why were they doing this? The room was oppressively quiet, save for the sound of my own rapid breathing. I felt cornered, like a prey animal trapped by the piercing gazes of predators. But their expressions weren't predatory, they were sincere, open, and almost tender. That made it even more disorienting. Are you serious? I finally managed to ask, my voice barely audible. My words trembled in the air, uncertain and fragile. Logan nodded, his eyes never leaving mine. Gabriel's gaze softened further, and I could see the genuine emotion etched across his face. We're serious, Gabriel said. This isn't a joke or a prank. We've felt this way for a long time, and we thought it was time you knew. But why now? I asked, my voice cracking. Why are you telling me this tonight? Gabriel stepped closer, his movements careful, as if he didn't want to frighten me. Because hiding it feels wrong, he said earnestly. We admire you, not just for how you look but for who you are. You're kind, strong, and you make people feel things they didn't know they could feel. We couldn't keep it to ourselves any longer. Logan nodded, his face resolute. It's hard to explain, but it's like we're drawn to you in a way we've never been to anyone else. We just needed you to know, even if it changes everything. Their words washed over me, and I felt myself trembling. The vulnerability in their voices, the raw honesty in their eyes, it was overwhelming. My heart pounded, my cheeks burned, and my thoughts spun in endless circles. I had never seen them like this before, and it was as exhilarating as it was terrifying. I don't know what to say, I admitted, my voice small and shaky. This is so much to process. Logan stepped forward, his presence both comforting and unsettling. We don't expect an answer right now, he said softly. We just wanted you to know the truth. As they stood there, their vulnerability laid bare, I felt a strange mix of emotions: curiosity, fear, confusion, and a reluctant intrigue. The night had taken a turn I could never have predicted, and I had no idea where it would lead. Logan spoke up, his voice slightly trembling as he said, we planned this night so we could all have fun together. There was an eagerness in his tone, but also a hint of vulnerability, as if he wasn't sure how I would react. Naidu offered a small, reassuring smile, his eyes trying to meet mine with a gentleness that felt deliberate. We thought it would be a night to remember. Something special, he added softly, his words hanging in the air like a promise. But despite their attempts to set me at ease, I wasn't sure if I felt comfortable. Their glances toward each other betrayed an unspoken understanding, a secret that I was clearly not a part of. The room seemed to thrum with a quiet intensity, the atmosphere charged with something I couldn't quite place. It was like standing on the edge of a precipice, unsure whether to leap or step back. Logan moved closer, his presence more imposing now that he was right in front of me. He sat down, his movements deliberate, as though he didn't want to alarm me. Come on, he said, his voice lowering to a coaxing murmur. Don't pretend you don't like it. Let's do this. I felt the blanket being gently tugged away from me, my breath catching as the tension in the room heightened. A warm wave of sensation rippled through me, and my body responded in a way I didn't fully understand. It wasn't just the physical closeness, it was the way Logan and Naidu seemed to orchestrate every moment, as if they had meticulously planned this encounter to leave me both curious and conflicted. My heart raced, torn between the unfamiliar thrill of the situation and the quiet voice in my mind urging caution. And then, unexpectedly, Logan leaned in. His lips brushing mine in a kiss so soft it barely felt real. It was fleeting, almost hesitant. But it was enough to send a cascade of emotions through me. I had never felt anything like it before, the tender pressure of another person's lips, the fluttering of butterflies in my stomach, and the strange, inexplicable sense of vulnerability that came with it. The kiss wasn't just an act, it was a question. An invitation to step into an unknown world. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. The kiss lingered in the air like an unspoken promise. And I felt as though I was teetering on the edge of something transformative. My imagination ran wild, conjuring possibilities I had never considered. Yet, amid the heady swirl of emotions, a quiet clarity emerged. I realized I wasn't ready to cross this line. Not now. Not like this. I pulled back slightly, my voice steady despite the conflicting emotions swirling within me. The kiss is okay, I said firmly. My words a boundary I needed to set. But I can't go beyond that. My declaration seemed to surprise them. Logan and Naidu exchanged a glance, their expressions flickering between disappointment and understanding. They tried to persuade me, their words gentle and encouraging. We just want to share something special with you, Naidu said, his voice soothing. Logan nodded in agreement, his demeanor softening as he added, it's about connection, not pressure. Despite their reassurances, I knew my limits. This wasn't about what they wanted, it was about what felt right for me. The tension in the room shifted, giving way to a quiet acceptance. Logan sighed, his shoulders relaxing as he smiled ruefully. We get it, he said, his tone sincere. We just thought, maybe it could be different. Naidu nodded, his expression thoughtful but respectful. Thank you for being honest, he said quietly. As they prepared to leave the room, I felt a pang of guilt mingled with relief. Their disappointment was palpable, but so was their willingness to honor my decision. I'm really sorry if you're upset, I said softly, meeting their eyes. But I have to do what feels right for me. They both nodded, their expressions a mix of resignation and understanding. Logan gave me one last smile, warm and reassuring, before they stepped out of the room. Alone now, I sat for a moment, letting the quiet envelop me. I felt a strange mix of emotions, relief at standing my ground, sadness for letting them down, and pride in choosing myself over the expectations of others. That night, as I reflected on everything that had happened, I realized it was more than just a moment of tension and desire. It was a defining experience, one that taught me the value of listening to my instincts and honoring my boundaries. It wasn't about rejecting them, it was about accepting myself. And in that quiet room, with nothing but the soft hum of my thoughts, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't expected, a quiet confidence that, no matter what, I had done what was right for me. That night didn't end with a dramatic climax but with a silence heavy with meaning. The glances, the words, and the actions left me with emotions I couldn't easily define. I learned that courage isn't just about confronting others but also about being honest with yourself and standing firm in your values. No matter how strong the emotions may be, we must recognize the boundary between curiosity and self-respect. Not all compliments or actions deserve reciprocation, especially when they cross the lines of respect and personal comfort. That night, I not only protected myself but also helped them understand the importance of listening and respecting others. Remember, in any situation, listening to your own feelings is always the best compass to guide your decisions. Thank you for watching and supporting my story. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the exciting videos to come. Your support is the greatest inspiration for me to keep creating.